small, intimate group. That's great. So my name is Steve Boughton. I'm the channel account manager at Highland Software for ImageSoft. So my responsibility is basically to act as their conduit to anything and everything within Highland Software, whether it be assisting them through the sales cycle, or if there are, in the likely event of issues with the software, getting in the right people to help our customers, getting out and seeing our customers, who are of course ImageSoft's customers as well, that are using OnBase. So it's a great pleasure to be here. Just kind of a quick show of hands so I can kind of set the scene right. How many folks are using OnBase? Looks like, okay, good. Most of you. Okay, so a lot of the terminology I'm going to use within this presentation will be fairly familiar to you as well. So certainly, because it is a small group, we want to try to make this as interactive as possible. If you have questions along the way, don't hesitate to stop me and ask questions. I'll do my best to try to answer them. So again, this is the SharePoint session, the Better Together. This is a message that I think if you take one thing away from this, that's what I want you to remember. It's that SharePoint and OnBase really truly function better together. It's the chocolate and peanut butter, the peanut butter and jelly, the LeBron and Cleveland, always better together, right? It really stems from our relationship with Microsoft, the fact that Highland sits on the SharePoint Advisory Council, and really take the best of both technologies, apply them together to really formulate your ECM strategy, right? So OnBase, you'll hear us talk about transactional content management, and that's, when you think of that, that's the getting the cold documents in, those documents that are text feeded in from line of business applications. It's dipping documents in. It's those high volume ingestion into a document management system. Whereas you look at SharePoint, it's a whole set of different functionality that provides. So why are organizations using SharePoint? It's a great tool. We use it extensively at Highland Software. It's great for worker productivity and a whole host of other things, whether that's, usually when I think about it, it stems from the collaboration or information sharing. Really extending that collaboration in an easy way to your user community, allowing them to set up their websites, all behind the scenes, knowing that this needs to be supported by IT, right, behind the scenes. So they have to support the needs of these workers, and SharePoint is a great way to do that for a whole variety of different reasons, right? It eliminates the file share, just people posting things out on their local network willy-nilly, if you will, without any sort of naming conventions. Nobody really knows where anything is stored. It's hard to collaborate in that environment. Eliminates kind of the back and forth on email collaboration, right? And the last one, it really eliminates the need for those dedicated web developers if somebody's setting up a project management website. It wasn't that long ago that companies had word processing departments, and if you were typing up a letter or a document, you would take your letter down to the word processing department, or a graphics department where, if I had to do a presentation, I would take my boards down to the graphics department. They would put it together. But Microsoft has done a great job. Now we're using PowerPoint or Word and now SharePoint to take those. So it's really pushed that down to the user community and given that great functionality. So why integrate OnBase and SharePoint? Well, it's like anything else within an organization. You have a series of potentially information silos, right? That it's difficult to communicate between the HR applications or your ERP or Esri, whatever that might be. So it's really about that application jumping within an organization, trying to present your users a clean interface, a familiar interface for them to interact with the documents or the information they need to get. Again, when you think about SharePoint, I like our integration because it allows users just to go, and you'll probably hear me say this a few times, is I don't care where the document is, I don't care where the information is, I just want an easy interface to go get it and have it presented back to me, and that's really what this is all about. And ultimately, and you'll hear this probably throughout a lot of the OnBase presentations, it's without that custom coding. So, we've done that, created this set of functionality, these set of modules to create these integrations. So, just some things to think about. Again, I won't harp on this too much, but some questions when you're thinking, you know, what the solution might look like without the integration. How do the SharePoint users manage paper documents, et cetera, et cetera? How, especially when it comes to managed records, how does that happen if they're not using it in conjunction with OnBase? So, again, really, what is the value? It eliminates that application jumping, promotes that worker efficiency, and this is something that's can be very helpful in the government space as well, as it can help promote that easy access both for your remote employees and for public user access as well, if you want to expose some of those OnBase documents out to the public. So it's really about, and you heard AJ talk about this a little bit, is making your organization ultimately more efficient and effective. Again, going back to, I don't care where the document's stored, whether it's an OnBase or SharePoint, whatever that might be, I just want it presented to me. So we'll talk a little bit about our integrations and how they solve these challenges. There are a total of 6 of them. But before we do that, we're going to kind of set the scene here with a little solution story. We have 3 different folks that we'll kind of look at, and obviously the project manager is, in this solution story, somebody that works off-site as a remote employee and is a heavy SharePoint user. We have the CFO, who is at the corporate headquarters, is both a heavy SharePoint and heavy OnBase user, and then we have an AP clerk here as well, who is at the home office or at the corporate headquarters and a heavy OnBase user, and how through the integrations they can all collaborate and work together and make the best out of their system, and of course all supported by the IT staff. So you can see here where these folks are broken down. All right, so as I mentioned, we do have 6 pieces or 6 modules that help us integrate with SharePoint, like other things within OnBase itself. Obviously, it allows you that flexibility to choose the functionality that you need, best fit your organization for these solutions. So the first one that we talk about, it was basically our foundation for the integration where we started, was with our web parts. And this simply allows users to search and retrieve, basically get that OnBase functionality presented to them through their SharePoint web pages. So I have a couple screenshots to show you some examples here. But these web parts, it's not something that's unique to OnBase. It's something that can be available through maybe an HR application or an ERP application. Basically allows that content to be presented back through a web browser to the user. Same sort of thing with OnBase. Basically allows an OnBase web parts install to sit on the SharePoint server and communicate back with the OnBase web server so that it can present the content, whether that's, in this case, a custom query, the documents themselves, and it still allows you that full, rich OnBase experience, whether that's cross-referencing or to take workflow actions, etc. So here we have a couple examples of some standard OnBase portlets that are available. Whether it's the custom query or foldering or file upload or envelopes. And again, this is with web parts. If you don't have other modules going along, this is kind of like right out of the box functionality. We also have the ability to now, one of our releases, several releases back, the ability to present HTML custom queries, just kind of that nice, cleaner, easier interface for your users to search for documents. We also do have module-specific portlets available as well. So whether that's e-forms or document knowledge transfer or workflow, again, this is kind of building that dashboard-like view for your users, trying to build that user interface to be as clean as possible for your users. This also extends to our business activity monitoring, these portlets as well. So again, building on that dashboard view. In this example, it's kind of an AR scenario, but it would allow your user in the AR department to go in and have this presented to them, and you can see here, based on some of the thresholds we have set for this particular screenshot or in this demo, to say, you know, hey, it looks like something has exceeded this. They would be able to either click on right on the actual bar itself or on this link here and get into that workflow to see what's going on there. So again, presents them that dashboard view. So as I mentioned, this is the foundation for our integration with SharePoint. It includes a total of all the ones I showed, 13 portlets. And what's nice is that status view, which is kind of the basis for this, as we develop more portlets for status view, those are all automatically extended to the SharePoint integration. And what's nice is that status view is something that comes as part of the web server license, so it's available at no additional charge there, which is always positive. And I've used a couple different terms, portlets and web parts. Basically, they are equivalent within, just based on which side of the fence you're on base or SharePoint, but you can think of them as the same thing. All right, so in this case, we take a look at a user here. It would really be those circles are a little bit light, but the project manager and CFO kind of in this case would be the best folks that would take advantage of the web parts application. All right, any questions so far? All right, clear as mud. So the next module that we have is really fairly new, actually, and it's called site provisioning. And this is really based on the fact that we recognize that at Highland Software, and we've heard a lot from our customers, that SharePoint, it's a great tool. We've, at last count, there's something like 125 million licenses within the marketplace. So it really has a tendency to grow virally through an organization, which can present a challenge to IT because what happens to these SharePoint sites when maybe projects are over, documents get abandoned, there's all that to take into account. So what's nice about the site provisioning is it leverages the power of on-base workflow to help with the creation of these SharePoint sites. So in this case, kind of in this example, much like we saw with that portlet that's available, the eForms portlet, we could have somebody submit that either from their SharePoint site or maybe even somebody from within OnBase could submit an eForm request to say, hey, I need this SharePoint site set up. And this is based on templates to help these folks that the IT department could have set up behind the scenes. So this notification request would go and someone within the IT department could go and review it, make sure that all that information is tracked, who's responsible for the website, how long they anticipate it's going to be needed to be up. So once that approval goes out, OnBase goes ahead and creates that SharePoint website for the users based on their request, and now they can go and invite other folks to kind of take advantage of that site and that functionality. So again, really helps track and manage the creation of those new SharePoint sites. So in this case, again, the project manager and really the IT staff benefit from that. Yes?
You said, if you go back to the last slide,
sure.
On step 3, you said OnBase creates the SharePoint site. What does that mean?
So what that will do is OnBase Workflow will leverage a template that would have been created by the IT staff, kind of like a blank template, and go out there and actually create the site based on that template that was out there.
Based on the data that was put in steps 1 and 2.
Correct.
Okay.
Good question. All right, so as we get into the next 4 modules, we have kind of this nice shared viewer that is a component of these next 4 integrations. So what's nice here, and you'll see this with a lot of our new modules, is that we've been able to embed a lot of additional functionality within these document viewers. So we have things like this embedded workflow panel. So when I've retrieved this document from my SharePoint site, if I have responsibilities to manage this workflow queue, and there happens to be a document in this workflow queue, I could take action right here from the document viewer itself. I haven't had to take those extra steps to log in to workflow and take action. I can take action here, and you can see here, hopefully it's a little bit small on the screen, but I have the related documents available to me here as well. So this extends to search. Microsoft Search I like a lot, as I've said before. It allows those users that clean, almost Google-type interface where you're just going in and searching for those documents. And again, I don't care where they're stored, whether they're stored within the SharePoint sites or extended down to OnBase. I just want to have that document presented back to me. And really it is transparent to the user. So again, you can see OnBase can take advantage of these searches across multiple sites and again, all while being transparent to the user. So in this case, perfect example is, again, a heavy SharePoint user, the project manager in this case. All right. Archive services. This is another module that's been around for quite some time, much like web parts as well. And this takes advantage of automating the transition of documents from your SharePoint libraries into OnBase, all right? And really takes advantage of, while doing that, automating that process, you have all the benefits of things that can happen to a document once it is pulled into OnBase, whether that's entering a workflow or starting the disposition process for document retention or records management. All right. So again, much like we saw here, documents can be created. Great example might be like a contract with the legal department, goes back and forth, has folks weigh in on it. Once it reaches a certain point within that collaboration process, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in just a second in terms of what those points might be, OnBase can go ahead and automatically look at those document libraries based on a particular event or a timer or that sort of thing, and pull those documents into OnBase, where they can be, again, like you see here, routed down, start a records management process, or perhaps enter a workflow. And ultimately, that workflow could be presented out to another SharePoint user through their portlet interface. So 3 methods of archiving these documents in. So ad hoc method. So basically from a drop-down list, the user could go ahead and say that, right-click and say, I want to archive this document to OnBase. They would be presented with a import dialog box, and they could move forward from there. So there's also a scheduled, for example, we would want this document library pulled every Friday at 5 o'clock. Any documents in here we would want archived into OnBase. And then basically an event scheduled or a check-in in the example that I used of a contract, maybe once it reached that status of final, OnBase can see that metadata within the SharePoint site and check it into OnBase at that point. So in this case, this really benefits, let me take a half step back there, the project manager, and also a little bit on the AP clerk as well. If they're going to pay vendor invoices and need to look for contracts as well, this is something that can help in that process. Any questions? All right. So ad hoc scanning. This is, again, a module that's been around for a little while. As you know, if you're using SharePoint, SharePoint doesn't really have any native scanning functionality. This allows users to leverage OnBase functionality, something that we've been doing for quite some time in terms of scanning and extending that to SharePoint. So allows your users, and this isn't admittedly for large batch jobs, but especially for those remote users that may be off-site or have limited access to your office, allows them to do these ad hoc scanning batches and through SharePoint, but still get them into OnBase, where much like we saw before, they can enter that records retention policy or enter a workflow and ultimately be presented back out if need be through that portlet to somebody else using SharePoint. All right, so very, very similar in form and function there. All right, so in this case, perfect example, much like we've seen, project manager and the AP clerk really benefit from this. The last one, really nice because we've talked a lot about SharePoint feeding OnBase. But in this case, with Content Connector, OnBase can feed information back to SharePoint. And the way it does that is anything that is high volume processed into OnBase can push links out back to the SharePoint sites based on the rules that have been set up within SharePoint. So if somebody wants to subscribe to, hey, I'm running project 2100, I need those invoices back. Was there a question? No? All right. So you can see here we have some examples of large batch processes being ingested into OnBase. Again, I mentioned those rules and actions that are set up on the SharePoint side, Once those documents are ingested into OnBase, again, those links can be presented back out to the SharePoint users for their access. And again, into that unique SharePoint viewer. All right. So like I said, any process can be batch processed or can be pushed out. Any batch process can be pushed back out. So whether it's through scan queues or cold or dip or a whole host of others. All right. And again, in this case, the project manager really benefits somebody from, a remote user. So there are the 6. Are there questions at this point on the different functionalities of the different modules or how they work with SharePoint? So I really want to plug, again, being that most of you are OnBase users, the OnBase community, there's a whole host of information out there on the different integrations with SharePoint and how they work, and the module reference guides. Definitely want to plug that. I'm gathering a lot of the organizations here are using SharePoint as well. Does anybody can anybody share about how you're using SharePoint within your organization, assuming you are using it? Sure.
So I work for the city of Ann Arbor. We use SharePoint for our web content management. It's one piece of that. We also use it for our intranet.
Okay.
So things like project sites, and that's where we are right now. Of course, the vision is to replace our U drive with something like SharePoint and move people more towards that model. I'm interested, though, in understanding, so Microsoft has this Office 365 product suite, which is all hosted. So it's hosted Exchange, Communicator, and SharePoint. So if SharePoint's hosted at Microsoft, could it integrate back to?
Sure, because it's just it would be communicating with the with our web server. So absolutely,
Cool.
Yeah. Good question. Good question. I know we looks like I finished a little early, but are there any other additional questions? Yes, sir.
I saw that there was a lot of back and forth going on between the two systems, and it sounds to me as though as long as you have the web server, you don't have to worry about any of the Unity APIs or anything like that.
Correct. Because the modules take care of that communication back and forth. Yes.
And if you have the web server license, you get these and future web parts.
Correct. Right, and especially those standard web parts that we saw right out of the box, the envelopes. If you have workflow, obviously that would be extended through there. But yes, absolutely. Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Any other questions? Yes.
Just to comment a little bit, because I spend more time in government than Steve. I've heard a lot of people recently, folks come forward and they sort of say, well, we have SharePoint, why do we need both? And I think that's very possibly one of the reasons why you were in this session. And I think the answer goes back to something that Steve said in his presentation. Of course, the IT staffs are over our stretch, and that's why we decided to go through this store, because it seemed logical to sort of outsource some of this work in this organization. And we have this collaboration problem, we have the U drive problem. I think what you want to think about is wrapping SharePoint around OnBase and having sort of a spectrum of documents in your life. So when you're originating things, the portal makes perfect sense. So the standard form that you're going to use, and to the extent that you still print those out, you put those all on SharePoint because it's convenient and people can run that themselves, and you can teach them to go to this place. The point at which you transition from a SharePoint to an OnBase is when that form is completed, when it becomes a record, when it becomes something that your auditors look at, when it becomes a piece of your compliance. So it really is a better together thing, because we've gotten used to using SharePoint. That makes our users happy. And if we have the repository with the security assigned to it, we still have the niceties of OnBase that we've gotten used to. And it's really about giving the users a door that they feel comfortable walking through. And I think that's a nice non-technical way to kind of explain how the two work together. It is the case that it's often the case that you find someone saying SharePoint can take the place of OnBase. But OnBase really has more security and other pieces to handle the public records and records management sort of responsibilities that we have as governmental entities. The second thing that I think is important in that is the workflow and both the speed to deploy and your ability to do that in an affordable way. As someone said to me the other day, I like SharePoint because it can do anything. I just don't have enough time for it. And I think increasingly in government we may not have enough budget for it. So that's another point in time where you sort of pass through the SharePoint door and use the OnBase workflow, simply because the speed to deploy and your ability to do that affordably is enhanced by doing that in OnBase versus doing it in SharePoint. But when you explain it to elected officials who might be looking at the OnBase maintenance bill, it may not look as clear as that to them. And I think that's why the questions continue to pop up. So that's what I've been hearing from government recently.
So you can develop a workflow in OnBase, but present it through SharePoint.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I think that's the real power.
Yeah.
Is take the good stuff here and the good stuff
Right.
here and snap them together, and then you're like a hero. Because not only do they have an easy door that they're used to walking through, and maybe it has the weather report and the headlines and all that good stuff, but you've got the OnBase workflow that goes up faster.
Right.
Yeah.
No, you can also use it as your integration point to other systems, right?
Mhm.
So other object types that
Sure.
Yeah.
aren't integrated with SharePoint, you can easily ingest those into an ECM behind SharePoint.
Right.
And then from the SharePoint interface, when you do a query, the results that includes CADs and videos,
Right.
WAV
it's-
files and everything.
Yep.
You can drive taxonomy with how it's ingested.
I do have a question about the indexing server. When it crawls, do you have to point it to a data store, such as a database, or do you actually? Because I know, OnBase is a marriage between the metadata and the file share. So my question is, when it's crawling the metadata, I assume you bind to the data store and not the back-end file share. Yeah.
You know what? I will check on that for you if I can get your contact information. Just to make sure, I'll check with Art just to see exactly how that works.
And I have one other question brought up of security. If your OnBase system is not integrated with Active Directory and your SharePoint system is for single sign-on, I assume it uses pass-through security. So my question is, should I take it offline?
Well, if OnBase is not, it's still going to prompt you for that. Yeah, that's
okay. All right. So in order for this solution to work seamlessly, you have to have Active Directory integration across the board, so it can actually do the pass-through.
It's going to be very helpful if you have that.
and
yes.
probably your rules lined up too.
Right.
You know, we addressed users' My Documents. You know, when you set up a single, individual sites, we pointed all their My Documents to the web dev directory behind SharePoint. So when individuals save out, they save it to their own document list within their own.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's a lot of neat things you can do with SharePoint.
Absolutely. Very good. That's all I have. I really appreciate you coming. And we'll be here for lunch if there are additional questions that come up, and I'll get back to you on that the other question you had. Appreciate you spending some time this morning. Thank you.